Night falls over Manhattan. On a high bluff overlooking the Hudson River, a stone giant glows in the darkness. It is a palace of 75 rooms, a fortress of limestone and bronze, standing as a defiant challenge to the established order of New York City. This is the Schwab Mansion. It was built by the Steel King, Charles M. Schwab, a man who rose from the factory floor to command the greatest industrial empires of his age. He built this house to be a monument that would last for centuries. Instead, it became a trap. Within a single generation, the fortune would evaporate, the lights would dim, and the doors would lock. It was a residence so colossal, so punishingly expensive to maintain, that even the city of New York refused to accept it as a gift. How does a man rich enough to build bridges and battleships lose his own home? And how can a house become too heavy for the earth to carry? Chapter 1. Steel and Ambition. To understand the tragedy of the house, we must first understand the fire that forged the man. Charles Michael Schwab was not born into the velvet-draped parlors of the leisure class. He was a creature of the blast furnace. Born in 1,862 inches, rural Pennsylvania, his education began not at a university, but at the lowest rung of Andrew Carnegie's vast steel empire. He started as a stake driver and a localized engineer, tracking supplies and watching the terrifying, beautiful cadence of molten metal. The steel mills of the late 19th century were places of blistering heat and unending hazard. They were loud, dirty, and chaotic. But where others saw chaos, Schwab saw a symphony. He possessed a rare dual genius. He understood the chemistry of steel, and he understood the psychology of men. He knew how to coax maximum output from a furnace and maximum loyalty from a labor crew. By his early 20s, he was directing entire departments. By 35, he was running the Homestead Steel Works, the crown jewel of the Carnegie operation. He combined military order with a gambler's daring. In his mind, rail spurs, raw ore, and labor unions were all cogs in a single, frictionless machine. Production quotas that other managers deemed impossible. Schwab met with time to spare. Carnegie, the small Scotsman who ruled American industry, took notice. He saw in Schwab a younger, more charismatic version of himself. When J.P. Morgan assembled United States Steel in 1901, creating the world's first billion-dollar corporation, it was Charles Schwab, at only 39 years old, who was named its president. Headlines flashed across 2 continents. The boy from the furnace floor now commanded the industrial spine of America. But a title, however grand, was not his summit. Schwab was restless. In 1904, he left United States Steel to take control of Bethlehem Steel, a struggling, second-rate concern. Critics whispered that he had overplayed his hand. Schwab ignored them. He refitted the mills, expanded capacity, and aggressively pursued contracts for the new age. Girders for skyscrapers, rails for the expanding West, and armor plate for the warships of the world. Under his hand, Bethlehem Steel rose to become the second-largest producer in the nation. Money did not just trickle in. It poured like a spring flood. But in the Gilded Age, wealth in a bank account was invisible and therefore irrelevant. Success required physical proof. The titans of the era built monuments to make their status undeniable. The Vanderbilts erected French chateaus. The Astors extended their dominion over Fifth Avenue. For a man like Schwab, a house was not mere shelter. It was a manifesto. It was a declaration of membership in the inner circle of power. He decided that he would not merely join the ranks of the elite, he would outbuild them. He would construct a residence that proclaimed authority, taste, and permanence. It would be the physical embodiment of his industrial triumph. Steel transfigured into stone. Chapter 2. Choosing Riverside over Fifth Avenue. Once the decision to build was made, the question shifted to geography. Where does a steel king place his throne? The conventional answer was Fifth Avenue. This was the spine of New York's aristocracy. a dense corridor of marble and masonry where the Astors and the Vanderbilts held court. To build there was to conform, to apply for admission to an existing club, but Charles Schwab was not a conformist. He looked at the narrow, constrained lots of the Upper East Side and felt hemmed in. He wanted room, he wanted air, he wanted vistas that matched the scale of his ambition. His gaze swung west, away from the established center, toward the Hudson River. He selected a site that took the city's breath away. The northwest corner of West 73rd Street and Riverside Drive. It was a parcel of land spanning an entire city block. The location was a gamble, but it was a calculated one. Riverside Drive curved in a gracious, verdant sweep, lifting the property high above the water with uninterrupted sightlines to the Palisades across the river. Below the bluff, the Hudson was a living tableau of barges, steamers, and sailboats, a reminder of the commerce that fueled the city. This was not the suffocating elegance of the East Side. This was a frontier. The district was still a patchwork in the early 1900s, with stretches of grandeur sitting beside raw, undeveloped edges. But Schwab saw what others missed. The new subway system, opening in 1904, was about to compress the distance between the West Side and Wall Street. Riverside Park, shaped by the genius of Frederick Law Olmsted, offered a green belt that promised perpetual beauty. By purchasing a full block, roughly 200 feet along the drive and 400 feet along the side streets, Schwab secured something money could rarely buy in Manhattan: isolation. He envisioned a chateau sitting in a private park, surrounded by lawns, gardens, and iron gates. Neighbors and passers-by would encounter greenery and stone walls long before they glimpsed the facade. The purchase price was reported to be several $100,000, a staggering sum in an era when a skilled laborer earned $2 a day. But it was more than a real estate transaction. It was a wager on the direction of the city. Schwab was betting that the center of gravity could shift, that the West Side could rival the East. He was announcing a new order, declaring that grandeur could be built wherever will and capital met the right ground. He would not inherit a view, he would command one. Chapter 3. Drawing a private Versailles. With the land secured, the dreaming ended, and the drafting began. Schwab did not want a modern experiment. He wanted the weight of history. He interviewed several prominent firms before selecting Maurice Hebert, a French architect steeped in the traditions of the Beaux-Arts. The choice of style was deliberate. Beaux-Arts was the architecture of empires. It drew from the palaces of the French Renaissance, orderly, symmetrical, and dripping with lavish ornament. It was the language of power, spoken by the Paris Opera House and the New York Public Library. Now, it would speak for Charles Schwab. The plans that emerged from Hebert's studio were extraordinary. The mansion would not be a row house. It would be a freestanding palace. It was designed to hold more than 75 rooms distributed over 4 colossal stories and a deep, complex basement. A steep, slate-covered mansard roof, the signature of the French chateau style, would cap the massing. Corner towers would punctuate the silhouette, making the house readable from miles away on the river. The materials were chosen to endure for a millennium. Limestone and pink granite would sheath the walls. Heavy bronze would frame the doors and balconies. Every elevation of the house was designed with equal care. There was no back alley side. This was a structure meant to be admired in the round. Like a sculpture, inside, the ambition widened. The ground floor was designed as a procession of staterooms. A 2-story entrance hall led to a sweeping marble staircase that seemed to float upward. The reception suites interlocked. A drawing room for receiving guests, a dining room for state dinners, and a library capable of holding thousands of volumes on mahogany shelves that rose to coffered ceilings. Perhaps the most audacious feature was the art gallery and the music room, spaces sized not for a quartet, but for a full orchestra, and creating a bridge between the stone walls and the garden was the Winter Garden, a glass-clad conservatory designed to keep tropical greenery alive through the grayest New York winters. Upper floors contained the private apartments. Schwab's own suite was a fortress of solitude, combining a bedroom, a sitting room, and a marble-lined bath. His wife, Rana, was allocated equivalent quarters, guest rooms numbered in the dozens, each equipped with its own private bathroom, a technological luxury that was almost unheard of at the time. The budget, initially sketched at perhaps $1 million, began to climb immediately. Schwab demanded palace details, not compromises. Marble had to be sourced from specific Italian quarries. Wood paneling required rare cuts of mahogany and oak. The winter garden needed structural steel to bear the weight of the glass while stabilizing the humidity. Work began around 1902 and continued for 4 long years. By the time the family began to occupy the home in 1906, the cost had ballooned to between $3 and $6 million. In today's terms, adjusting for labor and material value, the figure would approach $100 million. It was the most ambitious private residence ever erected on the island of Manhattan. The newspapers, always hungry for a moniker, christened it Riverside's Versailles. Chapter 4. Invisible machines of luxury. Stone and marble provided the spectacle, but in the 20th century, a palace required more than walls. It required a nervous system. The Schwab Mansion was designed to be a machine for living, powered by technologies that rivaled the most advanced commercial buildings of the day. The sheer scale of the interior set a terrifying engineering challenge. 75 rooms had to be kept warm in the biting winds off the Hudson, and temperate in the humid aggression of a New York July. Light needed to reach every corridor. Water needed to flow to dozens of baths without a drop in pressure. The solution lay underground. The basement of the mansion was a subterranean factory. A massive heating plant, fueled by coal, produced steam that ran through miles of concealed piping. Threaded behind the limestone walls, radiators, hidden behind bronze grills and carved wood panels, spread an even, gentle warmth. This system demanded constant vigilance. Too much pressure threatened the pipe joints. Too little left the vast suites chilled. Throughout the winter, a team of stokers and engineers watched the gauges around the clock, feeding the furnaces that kept the dream alive. Electricity, in the early 1900s, was a novelty that could flicker and fail. Schwab, a man of industry, refused to rely on the municipal grid. The mansion contained its own power plant. Dynamos hummed steadily in the sub-basement, generating current for thousands of light bulbs, for the kitchen machinery, and for the ventilation fans. The low vibration of these engines was the heartbeat of the house. Vertical movement was choreographed with rigid social logic. Multiple elevators served distinct worlds. Guests rode in ornate cages of polished wood, glass, and mirrors. Staff used separate, faster service cars that stitched the basement to the attic without ever crossing the grand halls. The architecture enforced the hierarchy. Public splendor in the front, invisible labor in the back. Even the air was engineered. The winter garden trapped solar heat that could become suffocating, so ducts were designed to draw cooler air from the lower levels and exhaust the heat through roof ventilators. The music room featured acoustically tuned plaster and masonry, ensuring that the notes of a pipe organ or a violin remained clear. Without the muddy echo typical of stone halls, all of this invisible infrastructure, essential yet unseen, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It also established the house's fatal flaw. It was not a passive structure. It was an active consumer. It ate coal by the ton. It drank water. It demanded a payroll of skilled engineers just to keep the lights on. Maintenance was not an occasional nuisance. It was a standing operation. Only when the heat ran true and the dynamos spun could the house transform from a construction site into a stage. Chapter 5. The house as a stage. When the doors finally opened, the performance began. For 2 decades, the Schwab Mansion was a byword for Gilded Age hospitality. It functioned as a stage for the performance of success. The music room became the center of this world. Schwab, who loved music, installed a massive pipe organ and often hired entire orchestras to perform. On gala nights, musicians would set up on the landing of the grand staircase, their sound cascading down into the entrance hall where the elite of New York gathered. Guests arrived in a procession of carriages and early automobiles. Women in gowns heavy with beadwork and men in white tie moved through the reception suites. Dinners drew steel magnates, senators, visiting European aristocrats, and famous opera singers. The conversation at these tables braided business with culture. Deals were nudged forward over courses of French cuisine. Alliances were solidified in the library over brandy and cigars. The interiors were curated to intimidate and impress. Schwab and his wife, Rana, had filled the rooms with treasures gathered during their European travels. Flemish tapestries hung against the oak paneling. Renaissance paintings were lit by artfully placed electric sconces. The winter garden, visible through glass doors, offered a surreal backdrop of palm trees and orchids, a defiance of the New York climate. But maintaining this illusion of effortless grace required a small army. The staff roster fluctuated between 40 and 60 people, depending on the social season. There were butlers, footmen, chambermaids, cooks, scullery maids, laundresses, groundskeepers, chauffeurs, and the critical engineering crew below stairs. Their duties were divided with military precision. Service stairs and hidden corridors allowed the staff to move through the house like ghosts, appearing instantly when a bell was rung and vanishing just as quickly. To the guest, the house seemed to run itself. In reality, it was a hive of intense, relentless labor. The operating costs were staggering. The payroll alone absorbed tens of thousands of dollars a year. When added to the cost of coal, electricity, food, taxes, and constant repairs, historical estimates place the annual upkeep at between $200,000 and $300,000. In today's currency, that is a burn rate of roughly $5 million a year. Charles Schwab relished the role of the grand host. He thrived under the chandeliers. But his wife, Rana, found the scale of the palace exhausting. She preferred quiet circles and privacy, the endless introductions, the management of the household staff, and the sheer public nature of their home drained her. Over time, the house that was meant to unite them began to reveal the distance between them. The monument sheltered two very different lives. Chapter 6, When Costs Outrun Glory. Beneath the music and the laughter, the ledgers were turning red. The question that haunted the edges of the estate was simple. Could the fortune feed the house forever? Gradually, the answer became uncertain. Schwab's spending habits were legendary, and they stretched far beyond Riverside Drive. The New York Palace was only the flagship of a much larger fleet. He maintained a sprawling country estate in Loretto, Pennsylvania, complete with its own golf course and guest cottages. He owned yachts, including one that reportedly cost over $1 million. He held memberships at the most exclusive clubs in New York, London, and Paris. He was a man who believed that ascent was the natural state of things. He had built Bethlehem Steel through bold bets and leverage, and he applied that same aggressive confidence to his personal finances. He assumed that income would always outpace expense, that the next big contract or the next stock surge would replenish the coffers, but the mathematics of the Gilded Age were unforgiving. While Bethlehem Steel continued to be a titan of industry, the steel business was cyclical. Profits rose and fell with the health of the national economy. Schwab's private investments, scattered across mining and manufacturing, delivered mixed results. Some paid off handsomely. Others bled money quietly into the background. By the late 1922s, the gap between Schwab's lifestyle and his liquidity began to widen. The house on Riverside Drive was becoming a source of friction. Rana spent more and more time at the Pennsylvania estate, seeking refuge from the demands of the city palace. Charles remained in New York, keeping the facade intact. Invitations still went out. The staff remained in livery. The bills were paid, sometimes slowly, but they were paid. From the sidewalk, the limestone walls looked as impregnable as ever, but inside, the atmosphere was thinning. The American economy was tilting toward instability. Share prices were climbing based on credit and optimism, not underlying value. Schwab, like many of his peers, had borrowed heavily against his own stock to finance his life. He was leveraged. A citadel of wealth can stand for decades, but it can fold with shocking speed when the foundation is undermined. On the stock exchanges of Lower Manhattan, dark weather was gathering. The music at Riverside Drive was still playing, but the tempo was about to change. October of 1929 was approaching. Chapter 7, 1929. When the music stopped, the week that broke the world arrived in late October. On Black Thursday, panic swamped the exchanges. By Black Tuesday, October 29th, the floor had fallen out of the American dream. 16 million shares changed hands in a chaotic frenzy. Prices collapsed. For Charles Schwab, the damage was catastrophic. His wealth was not sitting in gold bars in a vault. It was anchored in paper in Bethlehem Steel, stock, and allied investments. As the market imploded, the value of those holdings evaporated. Steel, an industry tethered to construction and manufacturing, seized up instantly as credit dried up and orders were canceled. Because Schwab had borrowed against his stock, the banks came calling. They demanded collateral that no longer existed. The cash to meet his obligations simply wasn't there. The arithmetic of the crash was instant and savage. The tragedy of the mansion was that its expenses did not recognize the depression. The house did not care about the stock market. The staff still needed wages. The furnaces still ate coal. The property taxes still came due. The machine continued to consume at its relentless, pre-crash pace, while the income feeding it had disappeared. Schwab faced a terrible choice. He tried to liquidate assets to prop up the lifestyle, selling off paintings and securities. But it was like throwing cups of water onto a forest fire. The scale of the building made real reduction impossible. You could not heat just one room of a mansion designed for airflow. The cold would seep in. You could not fire the entire engineering staff, or the pipes would freeze and burst. The lights began to go out. First, the low-use guest wings were shuttered. Then, the staff was cut to a skeleton crew. The social calendar, once the envy of New York, stopped cold. There were no more orchestras, no more galas. The Winter Garden's tropical plants, deprived of their expensive care, began to wither. Dust settled on the mahogany in the library. The palace, designed for the noise of crowds, was filled with a heavy, suffocating silence. It felt less like a monument to glory and more like a mausoleum. By the early 1932, Schwab was an old man trapped in a golden cage. He could not afford to keep the house, but he could not sell it. Who would buy a 75-room palace in the depths of the Great Depression? Chapter 8, Charity Inside a Dying Palace. Cornered by his own creation, Schwab found a temporary, dignified solution. If he could not use the house for society, he would use it for service. Throughout the 1930s, as the Depression deepened, charities were desperate for venues to raise funds, but they could not afford the rental fees of grand hotels. Schwab began opening the doors of his Riverside Palace for benefit events. The Red Cross mounted drives in the reception halls. As war tensions rose in Europe, relief groups used the galleries for auctions. Medical foundations staged concerts in the room where private parties had once roared. These events served a dual purpose. They raised money for causes Schwab genuinely supported, and they allowed him to maintain a semblance of his former status. It was a Gilded Age belief that success obligated service, and Schwab held to that line even as his success crumbled. The public paid admission to walk through spaces that had once been forbidden to them. They stared at the tapestries and the marble fireplaces, tasting a slice of a vanishing world. The irony was sharp. A palace built to exclude the common man was now welcoming him in, simply to keep the lights on. It revealed a grace in Schwab. He could have retreated into bitterness. Instead, he let the house become useful. But charity does not pay tax bills. The goodwill generated by these events did not fund the repair crews needed to fix the roof. the numbers refused to budge. The house was burning cash that Schwab no longer possessed. Rana Schwab was rarely seen. She remained at the country estate, leaving Charles alone in the echoing halls of Riverside. The separation was now permanent in all but name. The home built for a dynasty sheltered one aging man and his regrets. The final decision could no longer be postponed. Schwab had to face what he had built and decide its fate. Chapter 9. The City Says No and the Auctions. In a final attempt to save the structure, Schwab made an offer that seems incredible to modern ears. Around 1936, he proposed a gift to the city of New York. He offered the entire Riverside property, the mansion, the land, and much of the furnishings absolutely free of charge. He envisioned it as a residence for the mayor, looking to emulate the official mayoral mansion of London, or perhaps as a museum or cultural center. He asked for nothing in return but its preservation. For a man staring down financial ruin, it was a gesture of both generosity and desperation. He waited for the city's gratitude. Instead, he received a rejection. Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, a practical man governing a city in economic crisis, looked at the numbers. He saw exactly what Schwab saw: a financial black hole. The annual operating costs were punishing. The loss of property tax revenue would hurt the city budget. And practically, the house was a nightmare to convert. It was designed for private living, not public circulation. To turn it into a museum would cost millions in renovations for security, restrooms, and climate control. The city's answer was a polite but firm no. New York needed schools, clinics, and affordable housing, not a white elephant on the Hudson. The rejection was the final blow. It confirmed that the house had no value in the New World. It was an artifact, beautiful but useless. With no savior coming, the liquidation began. The auction started before Schwab's death. It was a methodical stripping of the soul of the house. Art dealers and auctioneers moved room by room. Tapestries were unhooked from the walls. Renaissance furniture acquired lot numbers. The treasures that Charles and Rana had gathered over a lifetime were scattered to the winds. The mansion hollowed out by degrees. The galleries showed bare plaster squares where masterpieces had hung. The carpets were rolled up, revealing cold stone. The bell system fell silent. Charles Schwab retreated to a small suite of rooms, living like a squatter in his own palace. He died on September 18, 1939, at the age of 77. The man who had steered the nation's steel industry left a personal estate that was technically insolvent. His debts exceeded his assets. The mansion, weighed down by unpaid taxes and mortgages, was seized by creditors. It stood entirely empty, a hollow shell waiting for the end. Chapter 10. Demolition. Apartments and the lesson left behind. For nearly a decade, the ghost of the mansion sat on the bluff. During World War II, it remained vacant, deteriorating through the winters, ignored by a city focused on survival. But when the war ended in 1945, New York awoke with a ferocious hunger for housing. Veterans were returning. The baby boom had begun. The city needed apartments, not ruins. The land beneath the Schwab Mansion was suddenly worth more than the stone above it. A full city block with river views was too valuable to waste on a dead dream. The math was blunt. A multi-family tower would house hundreds of families and generate massive tax revenue. The mansion housed zero and cost a fortune. Demolition began in 1948. It was a violent, methodical erasure. Crews arrived with cranes and wrecking balls. They salvaged the bronze and the reusable marble, but the rest was consigned to the rubble heap. The mansard roof was smashed. The corner towers were toppled. The music room, the winter garden, the grand stair, all surrendered to the steel teeth of the machines. Photographs from the demolition look like an autopsy. They show the house flayed open, the steel framing exposed, the complex veins of pipes and ducts hanging in the air. For a brief moment, the invisible machine was visible, and then it was gone. In its place rose a massive brick apartment complex. The Schwab House. It is modern, efficient, and practical. Where one family once lived in isolated splendor, thousands of New Yorkers now have homes. The view that Schwab loved, the sweep of the Hudson, the dark ridge of the Palisades remains. But now, that view is shared by many, instead of hoarded by one. The tragedy of the Schwab Mansion is not just about bad financial timing. It is a lesson about the limits of ego. Schwab built a house that could not adapt. It was designed for a single purpose: to display wealth. When the wealth vanished, the house lost its reason to exist. It had no utility, no flexibility, and no connection to the community until it was too late. Great architecture endures when it serves people. Palaces that become museums, libraries, or schools survive because they offer something to the future. The Schwab Mansion offered only a memory of the past. It was a beautiful, tragic mistake, a castle built on the shifting sands of fortune, proving that even steel and stone are no match for the relentless, grinding progress of the city, CTA. If you enjoyed this journey into the lost architecture of the Gilded Age, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, which vanished mansion should we uncover next? Your support keeps these histories alive. Thank you for watching until the end. How did you feel about this video? Let us know in the comments below. Empire Legacies truly appreciates your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.